recall this for those that can't make it, and we'll go now. Just waiting for a few stragglers just to join us, and we'll start in a moment. These calls, everyone's getting to the point now that one Zoom call is running to another, so sometimes it takes a moment for people to be able to grab a comfort break and a cup of tea, and then they come in. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining what I think is our 8th Pimento Network Zoom call in association with the MAAG. We've had, I think, now probably over 100 events since we started, which is great. Somewhere like 3,000 people have attended one of the events over the last few weeks. So we're getting a lot of cut through, and there's still high levels of interest. Rather inevitably, actually, as the lockdown continues, the subject matter has evolved and changed, and hopefully we're moving with the times and with how people feel. And for those that haven't been on the previous Pimento Network calls, pretty much the etiquette is the same as it would be for any of these Zoom calls, which is you come in, you're actually automatically muted. You're, in fact, warmly welcomed and encouraged, if you can, to ask questions. At the bottom of your screen, you see there's a chat box there. So if you've got any questions throughout the call, then please don't hesitate to send me a question, and then we'll come to those after the 3 speakers have presented. So the other thing to mention, obviously, is I'm recording this purely so I can share it with those people who are unable to make this morning. So looking out the window, the sun is shining. We've got a bank holiday Friday to look forward to, and there appears to be a bit of a decline in the number of new COVID cases. So there's plenty of reasons to be cheerful. On the face of it, obviously, lockdown appears to be working. However, with over 30,000 people who have tragically lost their lives in the UK, larger, in fact, I think, than any of our European neighbours, with the true number likely to be somewhat higher. We're still very much in the eye of the storm. Boris, as you know, has delayed making an announcement. Originally, I think he was due to make an announcement on Monday, and he's now delayed that till Sunday, which some people are suggesting may be because he wants to add a further extension of 3 weeks until after the late bank holiday weekend, with a more graduated return to work. But let's wait and see what happens. Meanwhile, I'm really pleased to say, and we've had lots of really positive feedback after last week's session with our professional advisors, that most of you have got a very good resilience plan in place that looks at your business and looks at your cash flow and looks at your client base and takes you from now until September, and in many cases to the end of the year into the spring of next. It's probably worth mentioning again that I think I said last week that the bounce back loans, not to be confused with the civil loans, are now available for smaller businesses, and you can borrow up to 25% of your annual turnover with a maximum of £50,000, and no capital or interest payments are due in the first 12 months. The government are picking up the tab for that. So it's, in theory, cheap money, and therefore I would suggest if you need the cash, or you anticipate you might need the cash when you look at your resilience plan, then you take the opportunity before they close this loophole, because I've heard that furlough plan is starting to cost them a bit too much money, and they're talking about tapering that and reducing that. And I would suspect this reasonably generous opportunity to get some cash in the bank may well go fairly rapidly. So perhaps now is the time to start to really think about what life could be on the other side. A lot of us have basically, lots changed, but a lot will remain the same. And obviously the challenges that brands, businesses and agencies face self-evidently will be quite different, I think, the other side of the COVID lockdown. This week we decided we'd investigate the new now, or the new norm. We've had quite a few people referring to this terminology, and it's becoming one of those ways in which we describe the future. And I've got a number of leading presenters drawn from the world of marketing and communications to join us today, all of whom, incidentally, happen to be members of the network. The first gentleman to speak is a gentleman called Ross Slight, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at SOMO. SOMO, I think, are pretty well known to many of you on this call. Ross is a digital strategist. He's fascinated by the relationship between the exponential growth of digital technology, the adoption and evolution of customer behavior, and the transformation of businesses to adapt to these new opportunities. He spent the last 25 years immersed in the world of digital, which probably makes him one of the digital founders, I think, almost. As the world has evolved from desktop to social to mobile to AR, VR, AI, and beyond. And Ross has been a founding member of 6 influential design agencies over that period of time, including businesses like Virgin Games, Tribal DDB. He has also helped to develop the first digital property for 10 Downing Street. So we're going to quiz him today on the latest revelation about their app, and also question why did Somo not get the brief. Probably because they don't know Dominic Cummings. Oh, sorry, did I say that? Anyway, he's won numerous creative and effectiveness awards, and he's a top bloke, and somebody I've worked with on a couple of projects, and I'm sure you'll all enjoy his perspective. So good morning, Ross, to you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Can you hear me okay and everything, yeah?
Beautifully.
Great, good. Okay, so hopefully it'll be very embarrassing if technology doesn't work. Hopefully this does work for people. Can everyone see this? Yep. Good. So we're Somo. I'm coming at this from a very biased opinion, obviously, because I'm digital and digital through and through. It's what we do, delivering digital ambitions at pace and scale. And part of what I wanted to talk about was this roadmap for the new normal, because we're getting asked quite a lot at the moment as to how we accelerate our transformation, how digital can solve these problems. And so what I wanted to do was to put together sort of 5 areas that we are concentrating on at the moment in terms of being able to help clients engage with the potential scenarios that could occur out of new normal through digital. So I want to take you through some of my sort of thinking on that at the moment. The first priority that we see is about creating resilience through scale. And this is vitally important. This is a brilliant quote from Keith Weed, the ex-CMO at Unilever, that's at the start of the lockdown, 15 years worth of people have come online in the last 15 days. We've seen throughout every single business, a massive, unprecedented demand happening. The inability for online grocery to be able to scale to that demand for deliveries. We have waiting now to buy seeds. This is queuing to get into websites because they can't handle the amount of demand going on there. We've got massive issues with regards to the standard models of logistics, of getting things to people, be that through parceling, be that through Amazon making key products, be that through the ability to be able to do click and collect, or indeed and to be able to actually get any form of delivery whatsoever. The logistics is under pressure. And we've also got a massive pressure on all forms of customer service at the moment. So we're in a position whereby this is unprecedented demand. And I wanted to try and sort of just encapsulate what's happening in this basis, because this is a very badly drawn slide, but I wanted to give an idea of what I think we're dealing with when it comes down to demand. So the demand is on the axis there over time. What we've seen is that we've hit, in this quarantine period, a massive demand peak. And that as quarantine, it's sort of slowed down a little bit as we've managed to get some more logistics in and some more ability to be able to cope with that demand. But coming out of this, these new people that are coming online are in a position whereby, and the way in which our current behaviors are, of those people who are already online, that we're doing more things online, means that my view is that we're not going to sit and have the same levels of demand post-crisis as we are pre-crisis. In the new normal, in fact, what we're going to see is there's going to be a demand gap, and that scale is going to be required across every single business, because the amount of people wanting to do things in digital journeys is going to be higher. And that will be that's sort of like the jump. It's almost like the jump we saw in the early 2000s when we went from dial-up broadband to to fiber and to faster broadband, from 56K suddenly up to 2 megabytes. Suddenly that big demand or the big facility of the ability to be able to create faster connections gave massive more demand on every single digital business out there. So I think the first thing is that we're trying to fix stuff, right? We're trying to see what's broken, what's under pressure, and what needs fixing. And that's both, sticky tape fixing, but more importantly, if demand is going to be higher post-crisis in the new normal, then we have to see what needs to be scaled. So we need to look at every single aspect of the business, from the technical stack to operations, to our processes, to our logistics. And in particular, not just look at where those need to be scaled, but where those can become competitive differentiators for us. In in my view, customer service is no longer about being a cost base to any form of operation. It is now a competitive differentiator. How we deal with customers as we go through this, the problems that that they need to be solved. This is now a competitive differentiator in the new normal. And so resilience is going to be through scaling that in a way that is going to make sense for the business. And I'll come on to talk a little bit more about that as we go through. So that's the first area. The second area that we're looking at is how we replicate physical in digital. And I think the view is that there's a lot pre-crisis of customer journeys where at best digital was merely an augmentation to a physical interaction, because we could do physical interactions in the same way. So be that talking about financial, your financial products and applying for financial products, or going and buying a car, they all required a serious physical interaction to happen, and digital just became a tool to enable some of those issues going through. What happened during the crisis is your customer journey is that if you rely on any point of physical interaction, your customer journey is just being destroyed, because you can no longer fulfill that physical interaction. And of course, we're in a position whereby, as we go back into this, the new normal, people will want to be able to physically interact, but we've already said that more people want to do things in a digital way as well. So we're in a position whereby you've got to start to look at this end-to-end digital journey. And it's very interesting. Yesterday, we announced the new car sales for April in the UK. I thought it's worth just talking about, because as an industry, it's been hit significantly because of the physical interactions that need to happen in the sale. So new car sales in the UK are down from 161,000 last year to 4,000 this year, basically. But interestingly, what was the UK's #1 selling car in April, and the car brand in April, right? And it was Tesla. And now there are some reasons for that with regards to some of the changing laws on, on company cars and everything, benefiting electric a lot more and the likes. But one of the biggest issues is that Tesla has an end-to-end digital journey, whereas most of the other car manufacturers still require some form of physical interaction on that basis. So the end-to-end digital journey, people, we think is necessary now to be able to protect the business. And so you're in a position whereby you need a parity between any physical interaction that happens and the digital journey that can replicate that. And that's a point of looking at every single aspect of your business and understanding where there is a missing element between the digital journey and the physical journey today. And indeed, where we can create greater efficiencies or indeed improve the journey itself through digital means. And, the ability to be able to open a current account, which will take you 25 minutes in a bank to do, but Monzo and the neobanks have taken that down to a couple of minutes through your mobile, is an example of that improving the digital journey over actually the physical journey. So that's the second area. The third area is about how we create efficiencies and how they drive digital transformation. And this is really, really important, I think, because we are facing a position whereby no matter, on the best of cases, we're going to be entering some form of recession. In the worst cases, we're going to be into a long-term depression economically from what has happened through this. The new normal is going to be one of difficulty. This is America. This is the 30 million unemployment claims filed in the last 6 weeks. In the first 2 weeks in the UK, we saw 1 million applications for universal credit. We are seeing a very, very difficult pressure on jobs, and the unemployment rates are going to go higher. That means that people's spending, even not just those people who are going to be made unemployed, but the people who are employed are going to cut back on their spending. This is McKinsey. Very quickly on this chart, everything on the left is all those countries who say that the households are going to decrease spending. On the right are those who are going to increase spending. The majority of McKinsey's research just out this week shows that spending will contract. That means that revenue is going to contract across all of our businesses. So what we need to be able to do is we need to start to think about how we create efficiencies, because efficiencies can save us money. And our view of digital transformation at SOMO is that there is a sort of 4 stages in the process. There's a stage of digitization, where you take your processes and put them from offline onto online, lock, stock and barrel, no changes. There's digitalization, where you improve those processes, innovation, where you create new processes to meet those demands, and then venturing, where you create completely new businesses. And in digital transformation, it's about that digitization and digitalization, where we can gain efficiencies across every single element of our business that's important, because that is going to drive cost efficiencies. And that is going to be the ability to be able to start to make our businesses leaner when we're seeing this contraction of revenue generation. So our view is, we are looking at, with our clients, what processes and operations can we improve and move to a certain set of automation within that, which will create cost efficiencies. And then what are the business cases that allow us to be able to invest up front to be able to gain long-term efficiencies through that digitization and digitalization process. And then the fourth area sort of is not counter to, but is a sort of shift in thinking about innovation and how innovation is going to become our plan B. Because I think today we're in a position whereby innovation has been very much a side bet for companies. It's a long-term process. It's often done outside of the core of the company. And this area here, again, back to this chart, digital innovation and digital venturing is all about gaining new revenue streams. Either that's new markets or new products in new markets. And where we've got to think about is that what's been holding innovation back in companies is basically about risk, because innovation is seen as being risky to the core business. But over the past few weeks, what we've seen is companies absolutely embrace innovation. So you've got, alcohol companies making sanitizer. You've got jeans companies like Hyatt Denim creating scrubs. We've got, 3D printing. This is part of Cisco doing 3D printing for PPE equipment. You've very quickly got companies which beforehand, almost paralyzed by the risk of innovation, have leapt full frontal into the position of embracing that innovation to try and develop new ways of doing things. And digital's been exactly the same. So we've had Netflix developing co-watching. We've had people like Nextdoor creating community help centers. We've had open banking companies or companies taking advantage of open banking to be able to help self-employed people to be able to talk to the HMRC in different ways. We've got lots of different digital innovation going on. But the old way of thinking about innovation as being highly risky is something that we're in a position whereby we need to get rid of, because innovation now needs to run in parallel alongside our core business, because it is our plan B, because we don't know whether our plan A revenue streams are going to continue in the same way. So in fact, what we see now as innovation is it's primarily a business risk reduction strategy rather than something that sits on the side as a side bet. It's now table stakes. And we have to think about innovation creating ongoing cycles and not being about piecemeal and not being something that's pushed out, but being core to our business, because that is what will allow us to be able to explore the new revenue streams. The final area is about the new digital work operating model. And this is a primary example of the new operating model, because we're all working in a remote basis. Here's lots of our SOMO team from around the world, from Colombia, from the US, from the UK, all on one of our stand-ups, all waving to everybody there, which is great. Look, I'll be very honest, remote working has its pros and its cons. For employees, what we found is that there's an increase in the amount of time they have, their work-life balance, often productivity. There are negatives around the social interactions which they can have through remote. There are negatives about people suffering with mental health issues. For businesses, it's increased the amount of agile decisioning, it's leveled geographies, it's saved money potentially through office and travel costs. But again, there are problems with businesses in terms of adapting to the tool sets, the cultural vacuums that are created through remote. And then also that principle of, understanding what people are doing and trusting people, the control element has gone, because you can no longer see people in the office in the same way. And some businesses still believe in that. We're only concerned about the development side of things, because that's what we do. So what we're trying to work on with clients is a new operating model. An operating model that has agile at its heart, because that allows a very, very firm structure that allow people to be able to to really bloom within that in terms of the responsibilities and the ownership that they have. A structure which has direct product leadership, and product leadership for us is about this blending of creating business value, customer value, and technology value, and creating the prioritizations for the business and allowing the decisions to be made quickly throughout the whole aspect of the process, the agile process. And then the right developer, maker, worker experiences, having the right tools to be able to collaborate. I think we've all got our head around video conferencing. We're now running, virtual collaboration sessions using things like Miro whiteboards, and that has people collaborating from Colombia, from the US, from the UK, and we're in a position whereby geography is being leveled. And I think a lot of companies are going to move away from, we have to have our development team sitting in-house, to being able to accelerate through multiple different models within this overall operating model, be that onshore, nearshore, offshore. The ability to be able to get the best talent around the world working in a collaborative manner, but also in a way that is very clearly leading to decisions and leading to outcomes. So we're looking at with our clients as how we properly implement Agile, properly implement our product leadership, and accelerate the operating model to allow geographical spread. So those, I think that's my 15 minutes up. Those are the 5 areas that we're looking at in terms of digital transformation with our clients: resilience through scale, replicating the physical journey through digital, driving efficiencies and driving the business forward through automation of those efficiencies, putting innovation at the front and heart of the plan B for our revenue streams, or indeed plan C, plan D, and then trying to put in place a working operating model that embraces remote at the same time as being able to deliver very, very valuable outcomes. So that's me. Thank you.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And let's talk about the Steve Jobs lookalike this morning and the black sweater. I think that all helps and convinces me that clearly we're talking to someone who knows this stuff. There's a lot of questions coming through. What I'm going to do is I'll save those questions, if I may, to after our last speaker, and come back to you, be able to carry on and join us. So we've had lots, particularly obviously working to changing flexible models and general interest in basically how you're flexing your proposition at this time to your clients. So we'll come back to those in a moment, if I may. I'd like now to introduce Ian James. Ian, let me just unmute you. Welcome. Ian is co-founder and CEO of Silver Bullet. Ian has led multiple global companies in the data, technology, media, and consumer goods areas. Prior to founding Silver Bullet, Ian was international CEO of Axiom, which was recently acquired by IPG for $2.2 billion. Prior to Axiom, Ian was Chief Digital Officer of the largest media agency network in the world, and he's founded Silver Bullet Digital Services in 2016, and more recently, the Silver Bullet Data Services Group in 2019. Ian obviously is keen to discuss obviously how global businesses, because he serves a number of global clients on the data side, are adapting to the new now. So I really would like us all to welcome Ian to this morning's call, and thank you for joining us, sir.
Stephen, thank you. No, I think, Ross, that's brilliant perspective, and I think, I'll try and give a different perspective, but it's clearly along very similar themes, really. As Stephen said, my background and why we founded Silver Bullet was really about all the seismic change, if you like, and I use that term a lot, I think, in this conversation. Over the last 20 years, that seismic change being all the different waves that we've gone through of change. And I think COVID is a very, very clear example, a very extreme example of a forced change upon us, a push factor, if you like, rather than a pull factor. We've been firmly pushed into that world that Ross very eloquently described. And I think, for me, it's really about now, what do we do? How do we behave? How can we start to turn this, perceived negative scenario into a very positive scenario? Because, new now and new normal is very firmly here to stay, isn't it? So it's mindset shift change, how we address that. And that's what we've been talking to our clients about, obviously. And really, just to step back and put that into perspective, how Silver Bullet serves its clients and why Silver Bullet was formed in the first place was that the world is awash with new technology and new data, that surrounds our businesses, big brands and small, big companies and small companies that surround their customer. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Anyone that's been operating in marketing forever it's fundamentally about how do you engage your current customers in a more effective and efficient way. And how do you win new customers? That's fundamentally it. So the idea of ROI of marketing hasn't changed. I want to get more bang for my buck. As a marketer, how do I do that? And what technology presents and data presents is a new opportunity to use that, right? And to use technology to do that. So that really is a very simple statement, but is very difficult to execute. And really, we were seeing that through the lens of big companies during my time with big media agency networks, Publicis Media, latterly, prior to that, Dentsu. And we really saw that, and then in Axiom, we were seeing that there was a massive raft of technology that was arriving. And the data, to manage data, this was the rise of the marketing clouds, if you like, that we all take for granted. Salesforce, Adobe, Oracle, all acquiring new technologies that they wanted to sell to big clients in order for them to improve marketing ROI through the smarter use of data. But there were very few companies that were able to help those clients to unlock the value, right? So the software vendors themselves, the data companies like Axiom, were all struggling to help those clients to fathom out what they needed to do next. And that's why we launched Silver Bullet. So that's what Silver Bullet does. It helps those clients to unlock the value that technology and data can provide to their businesses. And why that's interesting is COVID has just brought that into sharp focus. As we heard in the previous conversation, that is brought into sharp focus in every avenue of business now. And actually, COVID is moving us into a more virtual world, obviously, but one that is increasingly, I'm going to reduce my exposure to multiple brands and multiple venues to eat, multiple venues to drink. It's making me much more choiceful, I think. So as consumers, we're in a much more choiceful environment. So therefore, I expect more from brands, even more so than I did going in. This is only 6 weeks long. We're only 6 weeks into this. So we're already starting. I find myself as a consumer, and all the research that we're doing at the moment is finding that trend is here to stay. So being more choiceful means that brands need to be more targeted and more specific in how they address consumers than they have been before. Increasingly as well, there's a shift from media spends from traditional media into digital media. So the use of data and the shift to digital media is here to stay. Now, you've got to put that in the backdrop, of course, of the big seismic changes that already occurred, GDPR being the big one, of course. How you can use data. And more latterly, Google recently announced, I'm sure that you all know, that Google announced that they would no longer be enabling cookies in their browser. So that takes away the traditional specific data targeting capabilities that cookies have presented for digital media. What all that means in its entirety is that you've had a big seismic shift over the last 24 months anyway. The next 24 months means cookie go away. So GDPR plus cookieless future plus COVID equals a completely new world. All right. And that requires brands to refit their organizations. So we really look at the trends there. We've had an increase in engagements during COVID by big brands wanting to re-engineer their technology stacks. So their technology stacks are platforms that enable them to manage data, platforms that enable them to personalize websites, technology and data sets that enable them to be smarter in their targeting in media. All right, so that's a trend that we call in-housing. I'm sure a lot of you bumped into it, but in-housing is a fast-track trend now. So brands that want to take back control of the technology and the data that surrounds their customers so that they're in control of it. That's a massive challenge for agencies as in traditional terms. So if you think about media agencies and creative agencies, they are increasingly being asked to do less for clients as clients want to take on more of those responsibilities themselves, and technologies that enable them to do it. So that is actually, COVID has fast-tracked that in-housing process. So we've actually seen Heineken, Fiat Chrysler, Dolce & Gabbana, these are big global brands that are accelerating that digital transformation internally in order for us to start to manage these processes in a fast-track way. So really truncating project times, wanting to get things up and away in a much tighter time frame. I think where that leads us to then is really this idea of exploiting a new future and a new infrastructure and a new wave of tech. And you can sort of look back a little bit, I think, as well in these things and think about, well, what is this? Actually, I think it might be described as a new wave. You think the wave one was the birth of the internet, and a new world of content via websites, and the sort of turn of the century, dare I say it, 20 years back, where we were all trying to fathom out what do we do on the internet? How does that affect commerce? And things that you thought, that they were interesting thoughts, but they were very functional. So then wave two, the rise of the tech giants. We all take Google for granted. I remember talking to Facebook when they had 50 million users, and we said, well, when you get a bit bigger, come back and talk to us. Hubristic comments like that were coming from some of the incumbents in the media world. So that was a wave two. We now see the GAFA, the Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon world that surrounds us. And then wave three, of course, was really the last 10 years where it's been the adoption of those new services, both as consumers and as brands. And I think what COVID's done is create this wave four. And this wave four is really about harnessing data to improve marketing ROI in its entirety. And that creates a retooling requirement, a functional requirement for new partners. So a massive disruption to the whole marketing services world, if you like, a disruption of the incumbents and an arrival of new. I think I cite S4 Capital really, if you see Sir Martin Sorrell's vehicle, is a really good bellwether for disruption and how the incumbent marketing services businesses are being disrupted. And I think you can follow that if you want a bellwether or a kind of an indicator of change. Follow S4 Capital. I think it's really interesting. So Sir Martin's got some really clear views as well that I think are pretty spot on for what's going on in COVID and how that's going to affect the marketing service industry. But fundamentally, we're in this new normal. The new normal is a retooling, an in-housing, an application of data like it's never been used before. And that has far-reaching impact in the industry that we occupy as Silver Bullet. But I think a lot of us in the Pimento network occupy. I feel super positive about that. Our business actually grown during COVID, which is remarkable in itself. Going in, didn't know that was going to be true. For sure, we were as concerned as anybody. But that growth is a function not of how great Silver Bullet is, but it's more of this industry is fast tracking digital transformation, data transformation, the application of the new technologies that exist. So I think that's fundamentally a positive for us if you can get your arms around that and embrace it. And you're a fan of change, which I am, and a fan of disruption, and we are certainly as a business. So I'll leave it there, Stephen.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. I think obviously having the balance of basically the technologists and the data scientists and the ability to basically almost sort of transcreate data, understand data, and actually be that transcreation service on behalf of clients, I think puts you in a very strong position. So we're going to catch up with our friend Oliver from Savanta. Oliver was kind enough to join us, I think it was probably 3 weeks ago now. It feels like a lot longer than that, Oliver. He's the Executive Vice President at Savanta. He leads Savanta's public division, meaning he has oversight of all of their client research in central and local government, education, charities and public health, as well as the company's political polling. So it's always good to hear from Oliver because we actually get to see what people think about our politicians. As I think most of you are aware on the call a few weeks back, that Savanta have been running a weekly panel in the UK, I think in North America and elsewhere, talking to 1,000 adults and looking at basically their attitudes and how those are evolving during COVID. When we last spoke, they also decided they were going to have some questions relating to mental health. I think we were all focused on mental health at the time. Obviously, 6 weeks now into this, as you say, I think that's now become even more prevalent. So welcome again, Oliver. I think you probably want to share your screen at some point. I'm going to unmute you if I may. You've got a few charts to share with us. And then when Oliver's finished, I think we'll then open it up to questions.
Thanks, Stephen. Hi again, everyone. I think a lot of you will have heard me. I think it was 3 weeks ago, Stephen. Yes. So thanks for joining again. And I'm going to give you an update on our polling amongst the public and businesses. And we have seen some of the trends that I presented last time shift a little bit, which is quite interesting. And as Stephen rightly pointed out, there is a bit of new data on mental health as well. And it was really interesting listening to Ross and Ian and the perspectives on a kind of a new normal. And I think Ross used that phrase. I think a lot of us are, to be honest. And we've got, I think, some interesting data on kind of what that means from the perspective of businesses and working practices, and how there seems like there's probably going to be a bit of a shift to more digital ways of working in the longer term, in regard to working practices, as well as what Ross presented on the way businesses deal with customers. Anyway, I'll dive into this and pull out some of those things as I go through. So we've been tracking since about mid-March, as a reminder, 1,000 UK respondents every day, as well as a more in-depth weekly survey amongst 2,000 UK adults, covering things like people's level of concern, what they're up to at home and out of home, as well as approval ratings for the government and people who are having to handle the pandemic. And then amongst businesses, this is run every 2 weeks, and we run two surveys rather amongst larger businesses. And we've now got the third wave of data for this. Last time I only had 2 waves to share with you. 3 brief sections, one on levels of concern, one on impact of the pandemic, and one on perceptions of how the pandemic is being handled. What we do see is actually, since I last spoke, levels of worry appear to be starting to slowly decline, which is quite interesting. We've still got, kind of just under half saying that they are at least have a great level of worry. But overall, the trends that seems to be coming down a little bit from a peak of 56% around the kind of Easter weekend. And looking at the pie chart, 16% now saying that it's the most worried they've ever been. That is down from 20%, which we were consistently seeing from around lockdown through till mid-April. So signs that worry is starting to come down a little bit, maybe just as people get used to the way things are at the moment. As before, we see women and older people being slightly more worried than men and younger people. Looking at behaviours amongst the general public, again, maybe some signs that things are changing a little bit. While that green line at the top looks fairly flat on the face of it, actually, if you pick out certain data points there, it looks like there is a declining trend maybe in those who are saying that they're following government advice. It's still at 8 in 10, it's still very high, but it is down again from around mid-April peak of up at 86, 87%, and it's down at 79% now. It'd be interesting to see how that flows through over the coming weeks, particularly as the government advice will likely start to change at some point this month, we think. Looking at businesses and how confident they are about their survival. Interestingly, no shift between wave 2 and wave 3. Wave 3 was about a week ago, wave 2, 2 weeks before that. So what we're still seeing is around a third of businesses, small and large, saying they're not confident they'll survive the crisis. And okay, that means two-thirds are confident, but that third equates to a huge volume of businesses and people that work for those businesses across the country. And interestingly, one thing I pulled out last time, which is still true, this is as true for sole traders and micro businesses as it is for the largest businesses employing over 1,000 people, that level of worry. So while we do see a lot of worry amongst the public and businesses, that is manifesting itself in impact on businesses. Some variation on the trend there, looking through wave 1 to 3, but overall we've got around 8 in 10 businesses saying that they've had some negative impact on their businesses so far, and those fundamental impacts of impacts on revenue, on demand, still very much there. And you've got kind of 3/4 of businesses saying that they've seen a decline in demand since the start of the pandemic, and over half saying that they've seen a decline in revenues. There are variations there by business size. Smaller businesses more likely to be seeing those declines in demand and revenue. And there are some sectoral differences as well. Those sectors most affected, like arts, entertainment, for example, are the most affected. And maybe some of those sectors where maybe they can ride it out a little bit more easily and still operate, IT and comms, for example, are seeing the least impact, but they're still seeing some considerable impact themselves. Businesses are having to adapt. So, and larger businesses seem to be doing this a bit more than smaller businesses. So uptake of the government's job retention scheme and reducing hours are being used by businesses of all size, but much more likely to be used by larger businesses, with around 1/3 of larger businesses doing both of those things. But for me, a couple of interesting slides, I think, following that. A new question that we've asked amongst the public and amongst businesses around health and well-being. So amongst the public on the left-hand side, about 1 in 8 saying their physical health has got worse during the pandemic, but 1/3 saying their mental health has got worse during the pandemic. That's not to say the rest are saying it's got better. The majority say that it stayed the same, and minorities say that it's got better. But 1/3 of people across the country saying their mental health has got worse, I think is quite a startling statistic. When we ask businesses on their perceptions of well-being of their employees during this time, you know, when you look at those two numbers together, you've got around half of businesses saying that employee well-being has gotten worse during the pandemic, which is quite a challenge for businesses, given that we see them saying that some of these changes in business practices are going to be here for some time. So the new normal for a lot of businesses is actually increasing digital working practices, remote working. So that, coupled with maybe a decline in well-being, is quite a challenge for businesses to manage going forward. There are benefits to more remote working, obviously, but things like well-being and so forth are going to be a challenge for businesses to really juggle with. It's not just remote working that businesses are looking at for the longer term, though. So, you know, we've got 9 in 10 saying that the pandemic is going to result in long-term changes to business practice, and remote working is one of those. But other digital aspects come through as well. So increasing use of AI, increasing use of cloud technology are also commonly cited things, which very much aligns with the stuff that Ross was talking about, I think. And then in terms of impact, finally, on disposable income, that's really not changed too much. There are sort of variations day to day, but we are still seeing around 2 in 5 people saying that their disposable income is down at the moment. That's largely going to tie in with the fact that we see proportions of the workforce being furloughed and also operating on reduced pay and reduced hours. Finally, as well, then looking at how the public perceived the outbreak to be handled, and we see some changes in trends here. So the way that NHS are perceived, that top line there, very, very positive still. You can see from around mid-April, there's been a dip in people's approval ratings of how the government has been handling the pandemic. Various hypotheses as to why this may be. One, a growing sense of frustration, maybe, given the length of time this has been going on, but also probably growing pressure to publish some kind of exit strategy as well, which so far has been resisted. When we look as well at the ratings of individuals amongst the public, again, we see scientists, experts at the top of the pile there, the pink and the blue. People tend to trust experts and scientists more than politicians, and that's true probably at any time, and has been consistently so since we started tracking. For me, the other interesting line here is the red one, which is Boris Johnson, very much up and down, increased at the point of lockdown from quite a low base, remained fairly consistent. When he was admitted to hospital, actually, we saw things fairly at sort of a fairly high level for Boris Johnson, which is quite interesting. Since then, his trend has mirrored that of the government overall, which you would expect, at quite low levels. A bit of a bump about a week ago, but still lower than it was actually when he was in hospital, which I think is an interesting insight in itself. And then finally, while most on balance believe the government is doing a good enough job to support the NHS, employees, various industries, small business, there are significant proportions in the orange and the red who think then the government is simply not doing enough. And you've got a third or more with that view for most of these industries or groups of people here, which I think is quite a startling trend. And it'll be interesting to see how these figures change. I think as the government, the rumours today about the government changing the rules to furlough and the criteria for it going through into July, more and more airlines, for example, revealing plans around staff cuts and operations at Gatwick, for example. I said finally, but this is the final slide I'm going to share with you. It's a newer one that we asked businesses. And while we're obviously expecting some announcement from government sometime soon, if they did want to extend things for a further few weeks, the businesses we've asked are broadly in support of that at the moment. So around 2/3, 7 in 10 of businesses saying they would support the extension of a government lockdown if that was deemed necessary. So it might not be such a risky move for a bit longer if the government did want to do that. That was all I was going to share with you today, but very happy to take any questions that do come through.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I think those 3 presentations, I think, give you a really good insight and snapshot as to, I think, where we are in this cycle, if it is indeed a cycle. And I think just getting it from a technologist and from a business and then from a data point of view is really, really helpful to everybody, I think, on this call. We had, as I say, we had quite a few questions in, so I'm just going to file them as they've arrived, if that's okay. And if people are on the call, then I'll ask them to address it or find them if I can. Ross, I think to a certain extent you might have actually already answered this, but I'm going to just pose a question. How might COVID-19 now accelerate digitalization amongst smaller businesses? Obviously, a lot of the companies that you deal with are large global concerns, but I'm interested to understand how smaller businesses may well actually be accelerating their digitalization.
Yeah, well, we're quite lucky because we work with, both, say, large global corporates, but also with smaller startups and scale-ups, because, that allows us to be able to examine new areas of engagement and innovation with them. I think that undoubtedly the smaller businesses polarize with regards to whether they are very digitally orientated and often lead what's happening on large global corporations because they're just farther ahead and quicker ahead about those things. And other businesses don't see the need for it. I think that everybody now understands that they're going to have to digitize their processes and engage with customers in a slightly different way. Whether that will affect, the hairdressers of this world and the hospitality area of this world in the same way, I think it's going to come down to the basis of, can you deliver your product and your service through digital channels, and in doing so, or are you just using digital channels to market and to be able to reach an audience? And I think those are 2 differences which, if you don't have a product or service that you're going to be able to deliver digitally, then you're using digital for marketing to be able to engage and talk with customers. And the further away you get from where the product and service can be delivered digitally, the less important it is to think about the transformational aspects, because it's not core to your business. So I think, as ever, there's a wide-ranging set of different viewpoints as to how important it will be to digitize businesses. Right now, I think that every business can absolutely create greater efficiencies through the processes in their operations through digital technologies, and that's what you've got to start to embrace, because that can create cost efficiencies for you. Or save time, and that time can be reutilized elsewhere in the businesses. So that's the thing I would say from the smaller business perspective is the most important to concentrate on now.
Thank you. In one for you, you spoke about the fact that a lot of clients are in housing and looking to particularly get control of their data. all the sort of research that we've had in the last few weeks seems to suggest obviously clients are actively finding ways now to reduce their overheads. Where necessary, they're cutting people. One of our clients, in fact, made their entire marketing department redundant, so 24, 25 people. So the feeling we're getting is it's actually that they're more inclined at the moment, it's not true of everyone, to actually, again, outsource to organisations like your good selves, or find new models whereby they insource resources from third-party companies like yourself, and that obviously creates opportunities. Are you seeing it generally true that all of your larger clients are looking to move in the direction of insourcing, or is it more of a mixed bag?
Yeah, do you know what? It's I think we've all got enough experience under our belt now to know that there's never a paradigm. You know, there's never a single thing that says this is what's happening. You know, the pendulum often swings, I think, in terms of people talking more about the full in-housing experience. You know, like Vodafone have in-housed their marketing services, and it's not true, actually. So I think it's a fine balance between, you know, different companies are at different stages, obviously. You know, so a very advanced company, like an e-commerce or a digital first company, or born of digital company, these things aren't terms they would use. They've always been in-housed, so to speak. They've always had their data close to them because their data is their product. You know, so it tends to be businesses that are more traditional that are going through this dilemma of the level of in-housing. You know, how much do they need third parties to help them? And I think, truth be told, that if we ignore the very advanced digitally oriented companies and just think about the mainstream, then I think the in-housing piece is often a balance of some things coming close, some technology coming in-house, but still the need for outsourced companies and still for agencies, so to speak, in traditional terms. So there is a fine balance. It's never one thing or the other, is our experience. And often the ambition is larger than the ability to execute, is the other part of it, truth be told. So, you know, there is no single answer to that question, really. There is no kind of, you know, every company is at different stages. Every company's ambition is different. I think you also find different CMOs, as we know, change every 18 months on average. And there tends to be, you know, it's a bit faddy as well in that regard. You know, certain CMOs have much more bigger ambition. But I think what's new is COVID creates the new normal, which is a tendency to be wanting to find efficiencies. And actually, the answer to more efficiencies are bringing more in-house, actually. You tend to find that those that have done it find more efficiencies, they take more ownership, rather than the outsourcing piece to agencies, media being a big one of that. Big example, you know, media in a digital world, when digital is the majority of your investment, should you be doing that yourself? Probably the answer, when you boil it all down, is probably yes, you know, rather than black boxes and non-transparent fees and all the challenges that traditional media agencies face. So I think those are the kind of things that COVID has brought into sharper focus, really.
Thank you. This question actually could apply to both of you. So if you both have a point of view on this, do let me know. The government obviously recently announced the fact they're going to have this COVID tracker app and looking to roll that out. In order to work correctly, as I understand it, they need to get 50% penetration, and they're doing this test, aren't they, on the Isle of Wight. Two questions, really. First of all, should we be concerned about our personal privacy? And second question is, when it's turned off, do you think we can be certain that the data will be deleted and the system is not still alive?
That's an interesting question. So people will complain about privacy, but they don't really understand what the privacy actually comes down to, because it's the media whipping up frenzies. I mean, I don't think people quite understand that when they're using Google Maps, that their data is being used to help other people to be able to understand what the traffic flows are when it comes down to it. It's just not talked about in the same way. My biggest issue with this is how you're going to get that 50% penetration, because unless you make it a mandatory install on the operating system, which is where I think the Apple and Google models were going towards this, to be installed and then switched on by you and making the choice to switch on, I don't think you're going to get the type of activity to get those levels of, you know, to be able to track exposure, right? But data, when it comes down to it, personally, I can't understand why we've gone for a centralized data system. I'd much prefer to see it across on the individual devices being held on that basis, which I think gives greater control. But you know, there's going to be reasoning for that. Can we be assured that things will be that things will be switched off at the end of it. Well, you know, how many GDPR fines have we really seen happen about this type of stuff? I mean, we're in a position whereby we've got to trust that this will be, you know, that your data is properly used, and the government should be held to account in the same way as the Facebooks of this world and the social medias of this world and anyone else who is using data. I think the biggest problem is I'm not quite sure that people understand what the data is there for and what the risks are, in the same way as we've had, you know, Zoom's not secure type conversations. You know, well, actually, you know, that's the media again whipping up a storm over some, you know, some very, very small issues. So it'll come down to whether the media want to support this or not, in terms of whether it will be adopted and whether they properly give the view as to how the data will be handled.
Yeah.
What do you think, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ross is right. I think let's remind ourselves of the differences between the technologies in different countries, right? So there is a difference between using Bluetooth, which is what this app will be doing, right, in the UK, and there's a difference in location services. Location services has a much more is bigger risk in terms of privacy issues. You know, for example, where are you right now in order to enforce lockdown? You know, and those are some of the things that you've seen memeing up around this app. It's not going to do that. It's not a location services app, you know, and having worked in and around those data sets for years, you know, it's not that accurate anyway in terms of its, you know, the proximity to a person. Therefore, it's not the right technology to use for this particular use case, right? So location services is not the issue. Therefore, it's not about tracking me as a person or as an individual, right? Therefore, being able to therefore Bluetooth speaking between devices, I think is a very smart use of technology to help us to create a sense of taking back some control. I think its actual purpose in science, I wouldn't comment. I don't know how scientifically accurate that's going to be, you know, or helpful in terms of managing COVID. But I think in terms of mindsets of being more confident to go into restaurants, or we've been looking at the gym sector very closely, how to get people back to healthy activities. I think it's a really great application. So I think people will realize if it helps them, then I think the privacy piece becomes moot, really. But I agree with Ross, it's all in the comms. How this gets promoted by the Sun, the Mirror, the HuffPost of this world is going to be really critical. So I hope and I pray that that's a positive outcome. If that's true, I think it just becomes part of our furniture, as Facebook and Google have, as Ross described. You know, all of our research over the years has shown that people want their data to be used in a positive way. So as long as it's a positive outcome, which means I can get back to the gym or get back to the pub, then I think people will buy in, and hopefully we'll see it fly, because I'm certainly a supporter of it. I think we should get it on everyone's device, mandatory.
Okay, thank you. And Oliver, I suppose last question for you really, and related to that is, you showed us today that government trust is overall probably in decline. And therefore, when it comes to the adoption of apps and government trying to persuade us to do things, which tends to be the way we do these things in this country, as opposed to France, where they made it mandatory and you had to have an app or a piece of paper in order to be able to leave your home. Will it be the sort of thing you'll be able to track over the next few weeks to see actually people's propensity and concerns around this particular issue?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we'd look to add to the surveys going forward. I think the issue on trust is important for this, and you know, things like the government bending the truth on the testing targets and so forth doesn't help. But we have seen pretty good adherence to the rules generally across the board. The data we're showing is kind of between 80 and 90%. Okay, that is self-stated, but I think, you know, generally we're seeing high enough levels of adherence to the rules that we think that the app would get a good amount of take up, regardless on whether people think the government's doing a good job of handling things. I think they're probably two slightly different issues, and I think people will tie into the fact that they see it as a route out of this and being able to get back to life as normal. And given the sort of numbers we're seeing being talked about in terms of required uptake, sort of 60%ish, I think we would probably likely be able to hit that level, given the data we're seeing on kind of the proportions of people who are adhering to the rules at the moment. And just to back up what was said there about, you know, people's trust and in their personal data and how much they actually care about it, you have a minority, a vocal minority, who you know, will speak out about this kind of stuff. But we've done surveys in the past about trust in things like personal data on Facebook and stuff like that. Trust is pretty high, actually, and people aren't that bothered about it, really, when it comes to the public at large.
Thank you. Well, before I sign off, just a couple of things I want to say. First of all, thanks to all of our presenters today. A really, really fascinating session. Hopefully you got lots of value out of it for those that attended. We'll be sharing the video with as many people as possible. Oliver, I'd love you to come back again in, say, 3 or 4 weeks' time and give us an update on progress, if that's okay.
Yeah, happy to.
Reminder, next week, we, at the same time, we'll have the Leonard Cheshire Charity and a new initiative driven by Jonathan Sands of Elmwood, on a global project entitled How I See the Future, which is a program centered around children and their views on life post-COVID. So that'll be quite interesting, to say the least. And we have got, I think, 12 events over the next 5 days. So we'll be publishing our events list tomorrow. We welcome you as always. Please spread it amongst your teams. This is not just for agency owners and consultants. If you're working with people who will value and enjoy and get something out of this session, then they're only too welcome to join us. So thank you very much again. Thanks for all of your time. Can I wish you a good end of week and enjoy the Friday, our additional day in our diary, although most of us won't recognise it. And I'll see you all this time next week. Thank you very much again. Bye-bye.